Hey guys, welcome to episode 4 of a playlist on the rebuild of a guitar that was built between 1938 and 1944, a big thick body Archtop with this logo on it that we're calling the OK Junkpile. Now, the first episode we went over what it is, where I got it, how thick the body is, all that kind of stuff, and some considerations we might do when we're putting on. Are we going to electrify? Are we going to put a pickup in it? What's the bracing look like? How thick is it? What is its acoustic value? And then in the second episode, we steamed the neck off, and it has been refretted. Look at that. Still a little tiny bit of work to do. We preserved the binding that was on the side, and so that's good. And then in the last episode, we did a lot of structural work on it. There were cracks running down the spurs, which are the sides, and we did a lot of clamping and cleating and all that kind of thing, and got some of these splits taken care of. And now we are going to talk about how to finish this guitar, and we're going to talk a little bit about, while we're doing the work, about what role musical instruments played in our average everyday life and how that has changed over time, and what you need to do with something like that loud motorcycle outside, with something that's tore up like this, to keep it period correct while preserving the wood. Because guys, if you put a piece of furniture outside, hot, cold, humidity, frost, blazing heat, yeah, some of those things overlap, but it will turn bad. So we're going to start by going over this and looking at it and deciding what we're going to do. There's going to be some touch up. There's going to be some restoration of the sunburst. But at the end, we are going to have this thing protected, and it is going to be shiny and cool. But you're going to be able to tell that this is an old guitar. The main thing about this thing is it's going to be functional. And we are going to do all of this before we put the neck back on. We're also going to finish the neck and do what it needs to be done. We're going to get that all lined up and stuff before we get heavy in the finish. But I mean, you've seen me put necks back on guitars and set the angles and all that kind of stuff, and we talked about some of those considerations in the last 2 videos on this playlist. But let's get to the bench and start off with looking at what this thing is, so we can get some before and after pictures. And I'm going to give you some hints about how to make things disappear and how to accent the things you want. We're not going to relic this. We're not going to sand it. We're not going to beat it up. And it's already been through that naturally. So let's get over to the bench, and I'm going to show you some of my tricks that make this, well, it won't be the worst in show. It'll be close, but let's go. All right, guys, let's have a quick look at what we've got here. First off, we are going to work on the neck separate. We're going to get the finish on this thing stabilized and get a few coats on it. We're going to avoid putting finish here where everything is going to glue up around the pocket, but this thing is going to be really easy to handle without the neck on it. Yeah, this is the OK Junkpile. If you are following the playlist. All right, guys, you might be asking yourself, why are we working on the finish before we put everything back together? Well, there's a lot to do to stabilize it. It's a lot easier to do it with the neck off, if the neck is off, and on top of that, there's some stuff that we're going to do to the neck, straighten out one of the tuner pegs here and get these off, clean this up and finish it up. So we're going to want to avoid working directly around where the glue is going to go here and here, but the rest of it is open game. The issue here now is we have put some holes in this to fix cracks both here, and up here we put some cleats in, and we want to stabilize the body. We want to make it look, keep the look as it is, but there's some dings and nicks here and wear spots that we want to fill up. But we're going to French polish this, which is just putting layer upon layer of lacquer over the top of this. So anything we want to do to the finish in terms of color, touch up, leveling out cracks, those kinds of things, that has to be done before we start putting on the final finish, because if you don't do that, the color changes that you want to make and do are not going to stick to lacquer. Okay, the first thing we're going to do here is I wanted to pull these crack clamps out, one of them here, by loosening this up. By the way, if you use a tuner machine head on a drill, that works out pretty good until you pull the cleat through the top of the body. So anyway, we're just going to take that off of here. If you haven't seen what this looks like, it's two pieces of wood with some cork on the bottom, gap cut in it. And who uses a Grover Imperial tuning machine when you can use one of these $2 specials? Anyway, push that down a little bit, get it loose, and then we're going to take our magnet on a coat hanger and we can just reach in there. Grab a hold of it and pull it out like so. Okay? Do the other one too. Okay, wherever we filled with hide glue on the cracks, I've taken a razor blade, put tape on it. This tape is going to give you a buffer between the blade and the body, and I have a part of the blade sticking out on the end there. There we go, that looks better. And then I also have one where the middle is exposed with two pieces of tape there. The thickness of that tape is going to protect the body. Anyway, so we're just going to come along here. I'm using the one that has one side sticking out, and I'm just going along, and what it's pulling off is the glue sticking up, but it's not getting to the old finish. You really don't want to breach the old finish, and what that ultimately means is you're down to bare wood. You don't want to do that. So we're going to go along to each one of these where we've put a layer of glue to seal the crack that's surfaced to the top until it's fairly smooth. Again, avoiding getting down to the bare wood. Okay, so if you find that there's one side of the crack that's up just a little bit, do not take sandpaper and try to flatten it out. No need to do that, because we can come back later with clear lacquer and do some drop fill along it, and then we can just keep doing this until a thin layer of lacquer levels out the crack. That's way better to do, but you'll be able to tell how you're doing because the shiny part of the glue will reveal the low spots. Whenever you're leveling something and you've got hide glue remnant or a finish and you're doing drop fill, when you start doing this kind of stuff, the part that is low will still be shiny, not the other way around. It takes sometimes a little bit to figure that out, but yeah. That crack is good. We've got one here and then one over here. Okay, this is slow, tedious work. And again, you want to think about how long does it take? How much effort do you have into it? And can you bill for it? Okay, now I got some 800 grit of sandpaper, wet dry. I'm wetting it just a little bit, and I'm going to come along and I'm going to be very careful. I'm not trying to get down to the wood, I'm just knocking down the rough surfaces. And you can tell if you start to see wood color on your sandpaper. Again, don't go down to the finish. Some of the finish is still there, even on stuff that looks scratched up and stuff here. You want to keep that original finish. When you strip down the whole finish off of the guitar, you have just collapsed its value. You're going to say, well, at the end of this guitar doesn't look that great. Well, we're not trying to make it look great. We're not trying to fool somebody into thinking that this is the original finish. What we're trying to do is stop this degradation from going on further. So you're stabilizing the finish. Remember, this guitar was made around 1940, so it is 85 years old already. Think about the finish on a dresser or another type of table. It's 85 years old. Now, I can tell somebody has worked on this before because there's something coming up here that is certainly not high glue, and that's okay. Remember before, this was opening up whenever we would touch it. You're going to have to go back to your razor blade every once in a while once this is softened up. But what we're really trying to do now is we're trying to level this up so we can get these holes fixed and filled where we pulled the cleats through. That's what we're really trying to do here. Okay. Here we go. Again, if there is a little lip here that you can hear by doing this, you hear that? Or up here you don't hear that? We're going to fix that by drop filling with some lacquer a little bit here down the road. Okay, so I've got everything reasonably dried off. I'm going to each one of these holes and I'm putting a drop of CA thick super glue. And then knowing that the body is thick, which we've talked about before, body is very thick. I don't know how it gets any resonance at all, but I'm not gonna put anything over the top of this because it's gonna need to absorb some color. So I'm just gonna put that in there like so, push it down, and then I'll just snap it off and fill that hole like so. Got a few more to do here, and we're gonna do the same thing that we've done on the top on the sides here. All right, we will let this dry for a few minutes, then we'll level those out. Okay, little trick here, when you're cutting off these plugs, take your razor blade, it's got tape here, you got a little bit in the middle, and you just put it here, hold the top, and just spin this around a couple times. And because the tape is on the razor blade, once you get it scored, it just will pop right off very easily. And then you can just take this and get the fibers that are left Bingo. All right, guys, next thing I've told you about these are Wypall, WYPALL 80 cloth paper rags, and they're lintless and dustless, and when you run one over the top of a guitar, if it hangs up somewhere, there's going to need to be some work there. If not, that's a pretty good indicator that things are smooth enough to put some kind of finish on. So as you hear here, by the way, there's a party going on that's a whole block, and I'm trying to record over that, so if you hear it, that's what it is. But you can hear it as I go along. Listen. Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to use a cleaner. It's a 3-part cleaner, and you can tell that it tries to separate, so you agitate it all the time. And what this is going to do is there's a spirit element to it. One of the 3 ingredients is a spirit, and so it will spirit off. But what this does, this will clean up all the junk and crud and everything that's on here. And if we follow this up with naphtha, you are going to end up with a good finish to start. So how much dirt do you think was on this thing? Look at that. So we're going to go over the whole guitar with this, and you're going to see that it's going to dry off because, again, there's an element in it that spirits off. See if you can figure out what that is. Plus, it's accepting of water-based stuff, because you're going to see us using watercolors to touch things up on this thing. So it's got an element that is water-based, and it's got an oil, which is why it wants to separate. So when you figure this out, you tell me what it is, but look at that. Would you have ever have figured that that was all there? So I'm going to do this a few times until the rag comes up clean, and then we'll go off to the next step. All right, now I'm going to hit it with naphtha, which is not available in California, where everything has a cancer warning label, including my fingernail. Anyway, this stuff, you can see that it spirits off. There seems to be a connection here. But this is going to take off anything that our magic cleaner did not. You see, it's gotten a lot cleaner since we used the magic cleaner. There we go. Now we are going to let this dry. Now something that I find very effective is I take a piece of this Wypall 80 and I just fold it up like this. And I kind of use it as a gauge, as if there's going to be anything to hang here. And so when I find something, I've got a piece of my wet dry sandpaper, 800 grit, and I'll just come along and knock this stuff down without getting into the finish. And once that feels okay there, again, I am doing everything I can not to get down to bare wood. And sometimes you got to ask yourself, is this part here under here? Notice that I put the hole for the cleat underneath the trapeze tailpiece. That was by design. But we're getting this down where everything's pretty much level. And the stuff that we can't get level, we're going to do some drop finishing with lacquer. Now you can tell that this stuff, I'm not telling you to bill like a lawyer, but you can tell that work adds up. But if you really look at how much time you're going to have into something, it's a collection of a few minutes here and a few minutes there. By the way, we're going to fill these holes here with some relic wood. I want to change out the input jack for sure and get some more room between the volume and tone control that we're going to put here. But this is looking pretty good. Okay, now I want to let you in on a little secret. This is porcelain. It looks to be dirty. Well, this is watercolor. And so what I've got here is this little tin, and it's got different colors of water-based paint. And it's good stuff. It's Windsor stuff. This is what you get at the art supply. Okay? So what I do is you're going to have all kinds of tints in this color. So I would put on a tad bit of yellow. It doesn't take very much. You want to close these up. And you want to keep these in a place where the temperature is right and where they don't get all hardened up. But we're going to go. And you want to remember, when these have been sitting around for a while, there's a little bit of oily substance that comes to the top. So you might want to put the first little squirt out into a piece of rag and throw it away. And then I've got some white here that I'm going to put right here. Anyway, I get progressively dark here, okay? Like so. And then of course I'm going to actually put these away because I have every color that I need to do the work, okay? Now, one of the tricky parts about this is, so you got watercolor. You can put a little bit of water in a couple of these up here like so. But one of the tricky parts about doing this is the guitar has finish on it now. It might not look like it, but it does. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out what color this needs to be, because the part that you're going to touch up does not have finish, but everything around it does. So your product that you're ending up with as you're doing touch-up work here actually needs to be a tad bit lighter than it ultimately would be. So we're looking at this area here where there's some steam marks. We know that this is going to be dark, and I'm going to go over this with some of that stain ultimately. But this is pretty dark. So I'm going to pull a little bit of this here and a tad bit of this here. And did I pull any red into it? I must have forgot. There we go. So we are just going to keep the brush wet and bring some colors into it. A little bit of yellow. There might be a little tree right here. Anyway, what's going to end up happening here is we're going to end up with a couple of mixes that we can compare and say, okay, watch this. And we don't try to brush it on all at once and cover it, but we're just going to take the different color combinations that we've made here and put them on, like so. And nothing's going to be perfect, and because it's not, it will actually look okay. Needs a tad bit of dark right there. And this is water-based, so it will dry off. But that's basically the trick to it. I want to zoom in a little bit here. Let's get to this area right there. So I think you get the idea here. It's going to take a couple of layers, and all you got to do to reactivate these different colors that you have here, once you do more of this, you'll figure out what it's going to look like. And remember, it's not a big deal if you end up with a result that you don't want. It's watercolor, and you can take it off and basically start over until you get what you want, and then we're going to memorialize it or make it pretty permanent by doing a couple of last steps, which is ultimately French polish. Now, if you find yourself being annoyed by doing this, or it's probably better to realize that this is something you do when you're calm. There is not going to be a perfect result, and that's the whole point. So this thing has some wear. We just don't want these glaring things sticking out. Like, for example, I don't know what happened here. There's something darker in there. So I can bring up a little bit of a lighter color, remembering that there is a sunburst here that I'm ultimately going to restore, but I can pop in some of this lighter tan and just a tad bit of yellow. This yellow gets used very sparingly. When you mix that in with that, it kind of lightens everything up. You see that? A couple of scratches there that I want to blend in a little bit like this. Now, this is where the grain starts to pop. You can see the grain. This is a spruce top, and you can see the grain much better the lighter the wood gets. And I have some very fine tip brushes that we protect. And this is where you would use those to get the grain marks back. Do not use these little tiny brushes to mix up different colors on your palette, see? Now, the scratches are still there, but what I'm trying to do is give the illusion that there's grain lines in those marks, because in actuality there are. And then of course anything glaring like this, again, I just take a look at the different colors I have going on here. so. This one back here is really dark. And then I'm going to want to work on the areas that have cracks, like over here. I want to make sure you can see this part. This is actually finish coming off here, is what this is. Now, these cracked areas, you want to remember some of them are low, and we're going to end up doing lacquer drops in there. Make sure I can get where you can see this. Zoom in, the other zoom in. Okay. So if I'm going to drop lacquer in these areas, I need to make sure that the color I want is down below, because if it's not, when I put lacquer over here, you're going to be able to see that piece of wood right there that we used to fill the hole. So stand back, look at this from different light colors, and add in what you need to. Remember, it needs to be a tad duller, more dull than what it's ultimately going to end up being, because what's there has some finish over it and this does not. Remember, the more you get away from the sunburst, the darker it gets. So ultimately you'll end up with your palette having a transition of just about every color there is between the top where it's the lightest up here. So if I got some yellow and tan going on, I'm going to drop that there. I'm going to look at all the different places that I'm working. And when I go from one area to the next, I can just blend in the next color. It's a tad bit darker or lighter. Your biggest tool here is right here. This one right here. This is why my guitars are called Junkpiles. They play, they're beefy, they're structurally okay, and they look very rustic. But I'm not taking a grinder or, a fork. I've run through a CNC or GNC, a dynamite machine. I'm just going into the glaring stuff. Okay. This up here is drying now a little bit. I'm certainly not going to paint over it. This one came from the pick guard, I guarantee you, which I have the original pick guard, and it's as thick as a 2x4. That one needs a little bit of lighter brown there. There we go. Okay guys, well, I've got everything pretty much touched up where I wanted it to be. I am actually going to fill these holes over here. They're going to be exposed because it's going to be relic wood. It'll be part of the story. But right now, to blend this, I'm going to take a little bit of this Kalamazoo stain. It is not diluted. And this stuff, if you get it on a rag or something that's in your pocket and it goes through the wash, you do not want that, trust me. But what we're going to do with this stuff is we are going to put up on a White Ball 80 rag again. That is about not having lint and dust. And we're going to differentiate where the edge of the sunburst, the darker part is. We're going to stay away from the binding. And we are just going to come along like this and do circular motions around where the darker part of the sunburst is, and all that touch up that we did will blend in there. You want to remember that these guitars, when you're finishing them, this part will take care of itself, especially when you're French polishing, because you're going over and over. The low spots is where you really got to pay attention to. Those are the ones that we tend to miss when we're doing French polishing. But again, you will see that when the rag is fully loaded up, you want to stick to the darker areas first, and as the product goes off, you just want to be uniform, and you can adjust the pressure you're putting down on the rag and just let that darker part of the sunburst tell you what to do. And you'll find that a lot of your little imperfections that we were trying to paint over and get into the grain will get worked out, especially on these cracks down here where we cleated those. There's always going to be, it's like when you're using wax or polishing compound or scratch compound. This stuff is white and it will always get in next to where your purfling and binding are, and it will end up giving you this white line that you never want. So if something didn't turn out the way I want, I'm just going to put a little bit of moisture on the rag and come around. Again, roughly following where the sunburst line is until everything dries off, like so. And you'll find that this will blend pretty well. You can feel where the wood is soaking up the stain. And finally, you're just going to go on with progressively cleaner rags and just blend that line. Sunbursts are always gradual. There's never a noticeable line of demarcation. Again, if something's sticking out at you is too linear, put a little bit of water on your rag and blend it. If you're trying to work dark color off of light, start off here and then blend it inward. The other way, go the other way. If you're trying to pull darker color in to the lighter, you go this way, counterclockwise, to get the dark off of light, push out. Now we just need to let this dry. Okay guys, this is dried off. This is the beauty of using water-based stuff. Now I'm going to show you the most important part. You cannot make a mistake here out of anywhere. This is a very forgiving process, but this one, you are going to take lac pad finish and you are going to put it on a piece of white ball 80, and you are going to go over this in wipes, one wipe top to bottom, and then you're going to let it dry, and that is really important. So watch me here. I'm going to start here, and I'm just going to do this, and you will notice that this stuff vapors off very quickly, and it's picking up whatever we did. So we do not want to be going in circles or going over what we've gone over before. This stuff dries very quickly. Leave it alone. Now, leave it sit. I have not turned the camera off on purpose because you will see that wherever we started, it is dry already. This is what's going to be locked in. This is what we're going to do our drop of lacquer here and there to fill in the dents. And this is what we are going to do a French polish over. Okay, now we're doing drop fill, and I've got some 4876 clear lacquer product. That's a product number. You should be able to find that at somebody you know that sells guitar stuff. You want to remember that your lacquer, when there's more air in the bottle, it will darken off if it's clear, and it will turn brown over time. You can take a bottle that has room for marbles and keep it full and keep the air out, but there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of what appears to be age to it when you're working on something like this. So I've got a brush here, and the viscosity of this stuff is like so. It doesn't want to fall off, so it's pretty thick. But what I want to do is I want to go along the crack here, and I just want to let this lacquer seek its own level, because there's always going to be an offset when you are dealing with a crack. And rather than sand the crack to where you're trying to bring it level by keeping one side of it lower, you add and not take away. And of course, wherever there are divots and things here that you want to fill, you've got the lac polish, that one layer over everything. And so this stuff is just going to drop in here. And then once you get everything done, you're going to wait for it to dry. This stuff does not dry as quickly as the products we've been using prior to this step. And so you're going to leave this sit. The block party is starting up, so you're going to hear fireworks and all that kind of thing. I swear, number one, I'm weird because I bring a guitar and a guitar project to holiday celebrations. Believe me, everybody's not wanting to sit and visit with me much anyway. So I'm helping everyone, but there's actually a big party going on. So I'm just going to drop this stuff wherever I see something that needs to be filled. Now there's going to be a lot of razor blade work coming on, but the main thing is wherever I have a crack that I have glued and leveled it, this will be the way that I make the crack even itself out. And once you start working on this stuff with a razor blade, you want to remember that the low spots that still need additional fill are going to be shiny, not the other way around. We're not trying to paint here, we're just trying to let the product run down and fill wherever it needs to go. This is actually pretty good here. And you want to remember that the lac polish we're going to put on this is going to be very shiny. So, are you starting to count up the hours on this guitar yet? Are you starting to think about paying $600 for a guitar like this and then having me do all this work, and then I tell you that I got to have $1,200 from you to break even? Are you starting to figure that out? You starting to figure out you're not going to get rich doing this? Alrighty. I think that we will avoid filming during the amateur fireworks contest, which rivals anyone that is permitted, and we'll let this dry. All right, we have put a bunch of coats on this, and I'm keeping my fingers off of it, but the whole thing about French polish, as I've told you before, you're putting on layer after layer, and it gets smoother and you can feel it. And if you hear a clicking, that means that you've got a crease in your rag. But the whole thing is you come in off the side and you don't just plop on in, you just keep going in concentric circles, and you can use a lot of pressure and just glide off like this. You start running out of liquid, you always charge it from the inside, open it up. Fine linen, wool sock, and cotton on the inside, and you just keep going over and over and over again. I got this top about done. I still have to do the sides, and so I'm going to make sure this is nice and dry when I do it. When I flip it over, I'll do the sides first and get the guitar stood up to do that, but make sure you get a lot down in here in these concave spots, because the top will always take care of itself because it's sticking up the highest, but these areas right here, and again, you're just basically putting layer after layer after layer, and you can feel the lac pad sticking to itself, and you just keep moving. All right. Look at that. Okay, guys, let's end this episode. Great place to end it. I have some work to do that you saw me do on the front with the sides. It's already sanded, cleaned, and we've put all of our junk on it, and it's time to shoot some sanding sealer and do the same thing we did to the top. But let's end this episode with a wardrobe change. This guitar has been in non-stop action, Acton, California, culture of the world, cultural capital of the world. It's been in Long Beach, California, cultural capital of the world, and we are back in Malibu, California, faux cultural capital of the world. Now, the next part is going to be a little bit tricky because we have to put in the neck, which by the way has a new fret job, and we got some shims and we got all that kind of stuff. But the moral of the story is back still needs to be done, but the front of this thing, ooh, look at that. That's what we want. So, trick to French polishing is you can continue to French polish an instrument for its entire lifetime, because what you're doing every time you wipe on, wipe off Mr. Maggiotti or whatever his name is, you are just putting another thin layer of lac pad finish, whatever that is. It drifts off, it seals, and if you were to put a thumbnail imprint in it, you could heat it up with a little bit of steam and it would pop right out. But this is what we are after. It's got all of its dents and dings, and yeah, let's do a couple more while we're at it, should we? And it does that because the inside's been finished. That is as beautiful. Here are the two most beautiful things you'll ever see at once. Okay, let's end it with that now, shall we? Oi.